Okay, I believe we are live now. Welcome to today's stream. And today we're going to be talking about a few different characters that I really enjoy as a part of the Mandarin blueprint method, as a part of learning Chinese, as a part of thinking about the language. And of course, there are a lot of characters to learn in Chinese, but it's worth taking the time occasionally to just explore a character and think about them and go, okay, what kind of words can you make from them? How do the Chinese use these? Because it is the most interesting part of the language as far as I'm concerned. I think that the ability to understand what are called morphemes, mini meanings is the way I like to think of it, and putting a language together like that. We understand the concept in a general sense when we compare the way that we think about English. So, for example, there are many words in English where the morphemes matter a lot. We often will point out playground. Or here's an example, benevolent versus malevolent. Those are Latin-based words, and it's the bene and the male that makes the difference in the morpheme, because you're changing the different beginning prefix, and that tells you the difference between the words. And so Chinese words almost all function like that, but it's better because it's visual. And so you start to get a sense of what that meaning is. You start to build a relationship with the character. And so I wanted to cover that today so that we have a chance to just delve a little bit deeper into what characters are all about. And another thing that I'd like to bring up is that today, and kind of make an announcement about, is that today, for the first time since April, we're releasing a new long form video on our YouTube channel. I tell you something, guys, trying to figure out the best way to build an in-house video production team is pretty tricky. We've usually been doing it through agencies. Luke actually did a community post about this. So if you look at our YouTube channel and look at the past community posts, you can see an update from him explaining what's been going on. So there's been a few things happening. One, we've been trying to move from an agency helping us make YouTube videos to doing it all in-house, but it's a steep learning curve, and trying to get the processes all in place are one thing. But then imagine that the side of the business that is mostly focused on creating new content for our YouTube channel, which is mostly headed up by Luke, suddenly needs to move to the UK with his two young children, and then upon arrival runs into a few issues, particularly with their health. No worries, they're okay, but they've just had a couple of instances of needing to use the medical system and having a negative experience there. And then kind of dealing with some English weather in winter, which, if any of you are from the UK, I'm sure that you know the situation. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law live in Glasgow. So they're in it's a very beautiful part of the world, but it's also, in the winter, there's 6 hours of sunlight, and it's rainy a lot, and it can be a little bit miserable. And so they're actually going to move back to China, they decided, because Luke's wife is Chinese, so it makes sense. And so all that has been happening while trying to create a in-house YouTube team. And so for the long form videos anyway, we've been a little bit struggling to come up with a good, consistent rhythm to them. But today, I believe it's at 10 a.m. I don't know if that's Central Time or Eastern Time, but it's this morning, USA time, that we're releasing a new video, and I think they did a great job. Luke's the main character in that video, and what he's talking about is the 99 most essential phrases that he would learn first if he were starting Chinese from scratch. So I don't know how many of you in the chat are absolute beginners, but if you are, maybe you're not an absolute beginner, but you are in the early stages, I'd highly recommend checking out that video, not just because of the video itself, but because he has created with our team a PDF that contains all of the phrases. Also, the pack that comes along with the PDF has male and female audio with listen and repeat audio exercises that allow you to get those 99 phrases down as quickly as possible, and all of that is totally free. So the video is kind of your instructional guide on how to understand those 99 phrases, and then you get all of the practice materials totally free. So that is coming out later today in a few hours, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. So that's just an announcement I wanted to make about something coming up on the YouTube channel today. And also the good news is that now we have a good video editor in place. We have a good shorts editor in place. We are clearer on how we're making our thumbnails and how we're writing our descriptions. And we have a new social media manager who's helping us out to make sure that we can get this stuff out in a timely manner. And we're still going to be constantly improving and all of that, but you guys should be expecting more long form videos from us in the future. Another thing that we'll be doing too is looking at the content from these live streams and extracting out of it what we think is, useful information. So kind of like use the live streams as a chance to put together a draft of an idea we want to make for a video, present it to you guys, see what you think, and then put a little bit more effort into it, and then create a more standalone video that will be on our YouTube channel, better edited, not with me speaking off the cuff like I would be in a live stream, but rather not to say that I don't like to put in a little bit of my personality, but just a little bit more scripted so that it's the most useful to you. We're very interested these days in lowering our production quality, which isn't to say value, lowering the production quality to give you more value. We kind of went down the path a little bit of like trying to mimic YouTubers, like say maybe Johnny Harris or something like that, although he's amazing, but like having lots of cuts and action and dramatic moments and music and all of that stuff. And while I think that learning Chinese is a great journey and it's an adventure and it's not unreasonable to think of it like that sometimes, really, you guys are trying to learn stuff. You're trying to learn about how to learn Chinese characters, pronunciation, getting the phrases down. How do you learn words? What are you going to do with your process at the different levels when you're a beginner, when you're a novice, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced? How do you continue to get good input? How do you get tutoring if you want? So there's many things that we want to cover, and we want to just get right to the value, just get right to the education. And so that's going to be more the focus of the YouTube channel moving forward. And what that's going to mean is less like overall subscribers. We're not going to end up having, many millions of subscribers, but the ones who do subscribe to our channel, you can look out for some very helpful and useful educational content about Chinese. And so you guys can let me know in the chat if that interests you. I will check the chat in a little bit, but I want to just get started with this presentation first, and then I'll take a little break at some point and check the chat and see how it's going. So let's start off by talking about Ran. Now, I love this character. Ran is a character that is a suffix. Well, I mean, it has a few different usages, but today I'm going to talk about its suffix usage. So what am I talking about there? Well, Ran is when it comes after something, it often creates an adjective or an adverb, and it means like the appearance of that thing. So, you might look at Rick, who looks like a little sultan on this. I bought a meditation cushion, and Rick was immediately like, this is mine. Like, I took it out of the box, and she just was like, yep, that's where I'm going. I'm going to be on this forever. So I was just like, all right, you little sultan. But anyway, Rick has a very peaceful sort of appearance to her. So I might say Ran, and that would just mean a peaceful appearance or peacefully. And this was a character that if you look it up in Pleco, it's not going to say appearance, but this is why I love having spent some time in China and having had at least one really good teacher who was You Li Lao Shi. And he said that when you're learning Ran, you should think of it as appearance, like 样子. which is the Chinese word for appearance, and it will help you understand a lot of the words. So let's get into it. So how about if we took the character, my animations aren't going. Oh, there we go. We took the character for present, all right? And we said, okay, well, what would present plus ran mean? What would that create? Well, that's dang ran. And dang, this is a character that has a lot of different usages. One of them is kind of present. One of them is to serve as, 我现在当老师. So I am serving as a teacher at the moment. And I could also say 当下, which means the present moment, in the now, right? 当下. So 当然, the appearance of the present is something you would say, of course, naturally. So when somebody asks you something and you like, 你明天回来我家吗? Right? So are you going to come to my house tomorrow? If you respond 当然, what you're basically saying is the present reveals it to be true. Of course I will, right? Like it's kind of a way of just indicating that if you were in my head and you saw how much I want to go, you would know that, of course, the present makes it true. And so that's a cool way to say, to answer somebody, of course. 当然. Okay, now how about this? Oh, something has happened with these builds, these animations, where I have to like click 5 times to get to the character. But, such is life. Tu. This is a character that means sudden. It can also mean to stick out, right? So like if you got a wall and there's just like a little thing sticking out. And I think that in a certain sense, that kind of relates to sudden in the sense that if you have like a flat surface and everything is perfectly flat, and then suddenly there's a thing that sticks out, it has that feeling of like, oh yeah, this is the one thing that doesn't fit the circumstance. And so it's sudden. So the appearance of suddenness, 突然, well, that means sudden or unexpectedly. So, 瑞克突然叫了, right? So she suddenly meowed. Rick suddenly meowed. And that could be something I might say. And of course, sudden is in the eye of the beholder, but the point is that it's the appearance of suddenness, something that sticks out too. That's the other reason why I was saying that sudden and stick out makes sense to me, because if something happens suddenly, the only reason you're commenting about it is because it sticks out to you. If something happened suddenly, but it was completely unknown, I mean, like, technically speaking, everything is a process that's always ongoing, but most of it is unremarkable. There's all these cells moving around in my body, and suddenly they move this way and that way, but I don't take note of it. It's only that it sticks out that I end up considering it. And these are thoughts that I've never had, but because I learned Chinese, I end up thinking about it. So this is what I mean about how Chinese can end up changing your perspective sometimes. So I brought this one up before. An means peace. And then so if you say an ran, that means at ease or peacefully. So again, Rick has that kind of an ran experience, appearance. Rick. And then she 突然叫了. Although it wasn't that 突然, because she always, when I pat her little back on the tail, she always goes like meow, meow, meow. So she's a very vocal cat. How about this? 然 plus 忙. So 忙 is like blank. But usually, I find that it often relates to like an expression. And that's usually the case in how it's used. 茫然. So 茫然 is actually to blankly look at something, or a 茫然 expression. So like it's kind of that dumb sort of dirt 茫然. It kind of has that feeling to it. And there's this sense with 忙 that you've got, there's a sort of implied dumbfoundedness around it, I would say. Okay, Here's an interesting one. I like this one a lot. So the character for fruit in Chinese is guo, guo. And if you say guo ran, then what this means is as expected. And what I like about this, I think there's actually a probably a Buddhist or a Taoist root to this becoming the word for as expected. You know, 他果然没有通知我们就不来. So if somebody frequently doesn't, you know, they say they're coming and they don't show up, they're a flake, you might say, he, as expected, he didn't inform us and didn't show up, right? And what we mean there is that just as fruit eventually comes from a seed, you know, the seed grows and the roots go down and the tree comes out and the branches go out and the leaf comes out and then there comes a flower and then there's fruit, right? So it's the process, and then the fruit falls and the seeds go in the ground, and then, you know, so the process all continues. And so in a sense, guo ran, it makes sense to me that guo would be the character they use for this. And even though you might think of guo being the word for fruit, and it literally is, 水果 is the general word for fruit in Chinese, like in the fruit section of the grocery store, 水果. But the point is that that ended up becoming the word for as expected, which is pretty cool. Now, here's another one. Obvious. The character for obvious is xian. Xian. I like this character because what you have here is the sun component at the top, and then below it is the component for like profession or industry. And, you know, that I don't think that that's really getting too expressed in this particular character. But what I like about it is that it's like the sun shining on something makes it obvious. Shine a light and then you can see it. So something that is 显然, well, that means obviously. 他显然不喜欢你. She obviously doesn't like you, bro. I mean, I didn't say bro in that, but, you know, it's like that 显然. So the appearance of obviousness turns into obviously. And so when you see 然 used in this way, it's getting across that idea of obviously, 显然. Okay, I like this one a lot, okay? The character for self is 字. 字. And by the way, that 字 is a representation of a nose. And Chinese people, you know how, like, if we point at ourselves in the West, or at least in America, we tend to, if we're pointing at ourselves, we tend to point more towards our heart. In Chinese people point more towards their nose. So it's like, I don't know, they experience like this is the spot you should point to. And it's not like they point to their nose like that close, but like when people are like, 我这样说的, like when they're pointing, the direction of their point is their nose, even if they're about a foot out from their nose. And so this, that's kind of just a side point, it's a bit of a tangent, but 字, that's why, one of the reasons why it ended up being the character for self. And so 自然, the appearance of self, right? That which appears of itself is another way to think of it. And so this actually means naturally or nature, right? And what I love about this is that it's a good example of how Eastern perspectives on what even the self is cannot be extracted from nature. Because it's true, you take a human being out of nature and put them into a vacuum, they die, right? You must have air, you must have water, you must have the various things that are required for life to exist in order for a human being to even come out of the universe. Because we do come out of the universe, we don't come into it. That's a misunderstanding. It's like it's the same thing of the tree cycle. It's like the seed goes in the ground. The seeds create roots. The roots create a trunk. The trunk creates branches. The branches create leaves. The leaves create flowers. The flowers create fruit. The fruit falls. An animal eats it. It defecates the seed to fertilize it, and it goes in the ground and creates another tree. So like the cycle continues, and it's all reliant on each other. And so in some sense, it's all us, because if you took any piece away, then it could either destroy the process or change it fundamentally. Or, in some cases, if you were like, for example, I could say we need air and water, but air and water in some ways are the same thing. And I know it sounds very strange to say, but think about it. Water and air, so the water evaporates into the air, it turns into vapor, becomes a part of the air, and then it condensates and then rains and spreads across the other parts of the earth. So without the air, the water has no place to go in the water cycle. So it probably would never develop in the first place, and the sun would just, make sure that there's no possibility of water to exist, like most planets. And so in a sense, the distinction we make between water and air is just an arbitrary one, right? We're trying to say, okay, well, we want to be able to think about water and we want to be able to think about air, but if they can't exist without each other, then they're two sides of the same coin. They are the same thing. And then we can't exist without air and water. And so we're also the same thing. And so that's the Chinese perspective on what self is that we are as continuous with the universe as waves are in the ocean. You can point out a wave, and there's nothing wrong with pointing out a wave, but not to recognize that wave is continuous with a massive amount of processes that led to its existence is to just get a little bit too short-sighted. And so the Chinese express that all in two characters. 自然. So isn't that pretty cool? So one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about before I check the chat here for a moment is why we encourage you guys to check out the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge if you haven't done so already, and why we have that as the suggestion for what you do. mandarinbb.com/challenge LS. If you use LS, it tells us you came from the live stream. But the challenge, what we're trying to get at here, why we made it, and why we made the blueprint, but why we made the challenge is because reading, especially with Chinese, is the key to making fluency happen fast. And I know that it's counterintuitive because you'd think, why would reading matter when I want to speak Chinese, right? But here's the deal. The linguistic research and the polyglots and, which are polyglots are speakers of many languages, they all have come to this basic conclusion, which is that getting understandable messages into your eyes and ears is the only way to acquire a language. Now, as adults, our biggest marginal advantage over children is that we can learn to read quickly, right? So sure, a newborn to 3-year-old, their biggest advantage in acquiring language is that they're completely undistracted by another language being in their brain, right? So we can listen to our native language and ignore our target language, which is to our detriment. But what a newborn to a probably 4-year-old can't do is learn how to read to help them acquire faster. And so this is the big advantage we have, because when you acquire a language, you know what to say when the time comes. Now, you need to practice your pronunciation. You need to practice with listen and repeat. You need to shadow, and you need to have conversation practice with partners. But that all is somewhat secondary to the idea that you need to get the words into your mind first. And the best way to get the words into your mind early is through reading, right? Because you can take as much time as you want, right? So reading is so much more comprehensible than listening. And comprehensible messages are the key to acquisition. When you're a beginner, you can't take as much time as you want to listen to your conversation partner, because once they say what they're going to say, if you missed it, you missed it. But with reading, you can take as much time as you want. And of course, with recorded audio, you can listen and repeat a lot and keep listening and all of that. But reading allows you to get acquisition of vocabulary very quickly. So even though you might not think that reading helps your speaking, it really does, because the more you read, the more you get exposed to words, the more reps you get with those words, so that your brain spots the pattern and goes, that word matters, I'm going to remember it, okay? And then when the time comes to speak, that word will be there for you because you saw it in context enough. Now, if you did no pronunciation practice whatsoever, if you did no speaking whatsoever, it would come out choppy, and maybe the person doesn't understand you because they can't understand your pronunciation, but it wouldn't be because the word was wrong, if that makes sense. So reading is one of the highest leverage things you can do. And then, of course, with Chinese, that's problematic because it's like, well, how am I going to read like when there's so many characters? And so that's why we want you to join the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, because we have a great way of learning characters at Mandarin Blueprint that is not just effective, but actually pretty fun. It's like a little game. And so I think that you guys would really enjoy that. Check it out, mandarinbp.com/challengeLS. It's $7 to join. It takes 15 or 30 days. Okay, let's check out the chat here for a moment. All right, let's go here from the beginning. So, keep doing these live streams. I love it. Thank you, Tiago. All right. I am brand new to Mandarin, but hello anyways. Well, hey, if you're brand new to Mandarin, check out the video that we're coming out with later today. 99 phrases that we would learn if we started learning Mandarin from scratch. So if we were to start over, these are the 99 phrases we would learn first, and it's going to have a PDF with listen and repeat audio that comes along with it, linked in the description. So I think that's coming out in a few hours. So check that out when it's ready to go. How long with this stream before? Until the presentation is over. Keep doing these live streams, but please adjust the time. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, like I'm trying to be cognizant of the different people all over the world who watch Mandarin Blueprint stuff. So if I adjust the time for one person and don't adjust it for others, then it's kind of like, oh, you guys can always watch the live stream and these other people can never watch the live stream because it's the middle of the night for them. So my feeling is that I should actually vary it up. So this one, I started at 7 a.m. my time here in Austin, Texas, and I have done ones at 8 p.m. Here in Austin. I don't really like to do that because I'm an early bird. But, you know, I think that I should move it throughout the day. I've done noon a few times. I'm going to try some different stuff with that. Okay. Also, beginner in Chinese, check out that video later. I never really figured out the meaning of this character. I only use it in structures like 显然, 然后, 竟然. Yeah, I mean, like, I would say that 然 is like, it's one of those characters that is sort of suffix based, so it's tough to figure out. But I tell you, you know, 有老师, he just told me, 然就是样子. He said, just think of it as appearance, like the appearance of peace, the appearance of obviousness, right? And ever since he said that, I always found it, you know, much easier to try to figure it out. Okay. At the intermediate level, do tones really need to be focused on? I mean, it's a matter of reps. I would say that as you learn the 5 Mandarin tones, also learn the 19 tone pairs, because as you saw today in the previous slide, most Chinese words are 2 characters. So it's like first tone, second tone, an ren, third tone, second tone, xian ren, right? And there's 19 of those combinations. And that's actually the highest leverage thing you can do to learn and memorize, because, and what we recommend is choose a tone pair anchor. So for all 19 tone pairs, pick a word that you know really well, like ni hao, and then make that your anchor for the second tone, third tone pair. Ni hao, right, as an example. Or for me, with third tone, second tone, I go with 美国, because that's my country, right? So America. So then, you know, you can anchor the tone pair to a word you definitely already pronounced correctly, and then you learn a new word that has that same tone pair, and even though the syllables are different, the notes of it are the same. So 美国显然. So even though my tongue positions and how I enunciated the finals and the initials are different, the song of it is the same. So the analogy, I would say, it's like a trumpet and a violin playing the same notes. It sounds different, but it sounds the same too, right? So there's an element there. Okay. And so at an intermediate level, I find that the tones tend to get easier, but you never stop thinking about pronunciation entirely. It just diminishes over time. Hi from Brazil. Welcome. Because there is a microsecond difference between sit and seat, but virtually they sound the same. Sit and seat difference can be identified by its adjacent words in a sentence. Okay. Love your work, Phil. I'm on my way to 500 characters with Mandarin Blueprint Method. Excellent. Alas, it's bedtime here in Australia. We'll watch the replay. All right, Richard. As Chinese, we don't know what "ran" means in "sui ran ran hou." We just remember the whole word. Sure. It's necessary to know when we should remember the whole word and when we shouldn't. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that if you acquired it as a child, and you were surrounded by it by your whole society at the very earliest stages, that doesn't mean that people learning as adults should mimic how you learned it, right? Because we are dealing with a fully developed brain in the case of somebody who is, 25 years or older. I mean, I suppose we have people on the course sometimes who are younger than that. But like, if you're starting from a position of having a fully developed brain, like I started learning Chinese when I was 26. So I'm kind of a classic example of somebody who started learning as an adult. And the idea of spending 5 years just like not reading anything, not doing anything to try to make my progress better, but rather only listening and surrounding myself with Chinese in the same way that a kid was is, it's a daunting task. It's like I got my life to live. And so I'm going to go to zero and have no reading and all that. As adults, we can learn to read. We can learn the principles of pronunciation and we can conceptualize it. So you can actually create a study plan, which isn't what you would do as a young child, right? So it's not totally analogous. Welcome from our Brazilian friend here. We don't look into the meaning of guo here. Yeah, I mean, green hat, yeah, sure, of course. You're like, again, if people are watching this and thinking that I should learn like a Chinese native learns, then I don't know. I don't think that that's what you should do. In some sense, you get comprehensible messages, and Chinese people get comprehensible messages, obviously. But it's like the path they go about it starts with an infant's brain and then goes from there. I'm assuming that this live stream doesn't have any infants. All right. 老师，您很漂亮. Thank you. I mean, it's calling a guy 漂亮 is, look, I am happy to be called 漂亮, but usually if you're going to say this about a guy, you'll say 帅. But at these days, I'm just a 叔叔, and so it's all good. All right. Learning English and Chinese. This video is quintessential. Hi from Ukraine. Let's see here. 当然, it's not like, you wouldn't just say, you said interchangeably, you can just say 当然 as a response. You can just say that on its own. You can say 当然 like as a response to somebody to say of course. You can't say 自然 as a response. But there is a context where you might be able to interchange them if you were saying like 我今天一天到晚一直在工作，我自然睡着了. Right? So like I naturally fell asleep, and the implication is because I was so tired from all the work I did all day from morning to night. And so the idea there would be, you could say 当然 there. It would be a little bit off. 自然 feels better there because you're saying like it was a natural result of what I did. But I'm just saying that like, yeah, no, I think that they're used a little bit differently. But yeah, the tricky thing about translation sometimes is like, yeah, now that I think of it, I'm like, okay, they both have that. I just think of 当然 as of course. That would be a better way to think of it. Okay. New learner. Tell me what characters learn first after learning pinyin. I have laid it all out from character 1 to 3050. So If you want to understand what I'm talking about, mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls, and you will learn all about it from that. Hello from Indonesia. Welcome. Aklo, optimal character learning order. Thanks, Chris. 太好了. My missus is Chinese. She speaks what she calls 50%. Maybe it's Chinese slang or shortened. Makes it kind of difficult to learn Mandarin. She's from Fushun. Any tips? So what I would say is that... actually, where is Fushun? Let me look that up, because I've not heard of that city. Just give me a sec here. Fushun. Oh, okay, that's up in outside of Shenyang. Gotcha. In Liaoning province. So she's Dongbei. Well, okay, so if she is a Dongbei-ren, then I would say that she probably, I mean, that's closer to Mandarin than most things. You know, like the most Mandarin speaking place is Shijiazhuang, which is in the capital of Hebei province. Hebei is the province that surrounds Beijing, and even they only speak 91% Mandarin. Mandarin is the language that is like the common tongue across the country, and of course across the world, because there's so many Chinese people all over the world. And so what I would say is that the approach I would take is try to learn Mandarin really well and then learn a dialect off of Mandarin. Because if you learn a dialect only, first of all, it's really tough to learn a dialect outside of the place that speaks that dialect, because there's not like, there'll be big courses like ours for Mandarin that give you advice on how to learn on your own wherever you are in the world, but there's not enough resources for the individual dialect, or at least they're really hard to find, that you could listen to unless you were in Fushun, right? So if you were in Fushun, then you could go around, talk to the locals, pick up the local dialect. But if you learn Mandarin first, like for example, I lived in Sichuan, and they speak a dialect there called Sichuanese, you know, Sichuanhua, and it's different from Mandarin, but it's related, right? You can hear how they're similar languages. In fact, Sichuanhua is still considered a part of the northern dialects. And so when you hear somebody speaking Sichuanese, it sounds crazy at first if you're used to Mandarin. But then what I noticed is that over the years, I started to be able to understand Sichuanese. I don't really speak it very well, but I could understand it because I could make the connection to Mandarin. I could hear, oh, you just said this. I know you just said, 吃饭喽. And I was like, oh, you're saying 吃饭了. Right? You know, like, and so, yeah, anyway. Okay. Amazing course. Thanks, Kay. So yeah, just to finish up, my advice, Tom, is learn Mandarin. Because if you learn Mandarin, you'll be able to then move to the dialect. Okay. Thanks for the compliment, Kay. Would you recommend any Chinese TV show or cartoon good for beginners to practice their listening? So we have a whole resource list as a part of our Mandarin Immersion Masterclass, which is a part of the Blueprint course that we have. We update it every week. And so it's got a bunch of shows that are leveled. But I will say this about TV in general. If you're already at the point where you understand enough that you can understand the TV shows, then that's great. But if you haven't gotten there yet, it might be better to, I mean, I don't know. I'm always of two minds about it. On the one hand, it's never bad to put Chinese on. Like having Chinese on at all is good because it gets your unconscious mind used to it. But if you can't understand it yet, then you need to build more comprehension. Our big thing here is build, get, and activate. That's our big focus here at Mandarin Blueprint. And so building would be something like learning individual characters, right? And if you don't know any characters at all, then, you need to spend some time learning the characters before you can even have a chance of reading a sentence, because you got to pick up the component parts. And it's similarly true that when you learn a lot of characters and learn a lot of words, you can then pick up a lot of vocabulary and then watch a TV show and you actually have a good shot of understanding, especially since they always have the subtitles. They always have the subtitles because of the dialects. They want to make sure that no matter where you are in the country, you can still understand this TV show, even though they're speaking Mandarin. And so learning the characters has this high leverage. If you do already know a fair bit of Chinese, I mean, like, I like to first do shows that were originally in English that were dubbed in Chinese that you know the content to. And I know that might sound like shouldn't you watch the Chinese shows? Yes, but it's stepping stones, right? I think the thing that you should do first is, like, for example, I found a Chinese dub of Peppa Pig. Now, I'm a little bit too old for Peppa Pig. Like, it wasn't around when I was a kid. But suppose that I was a little bit younger and I watched Peppa Pig as a kid. Watching the Chinese version would make a lot of sense because I already kind of know the story. Also, kids shows do tend to have, like, obvious life lessons in them and stuff. So you can kind of search around. But the problem is that it's hard for me to give recommendations because it depends on your interests. You know, so much about TV. And that's why we made the immersion list in the Mandarin Immersion Masterclass, because it gives you a chance to look through a bunch of different stuff, and you would pick different stuff than I do, you know. Okay. Here's the thing. I need to keep going with the presentation, but I will pick up where I left off with Zine after this, and then we'll go from there. All right. So let's get into this next section on jian. So I want to keep going. Hold on, let me get the chat off the screen here. There we go. So I'm going to go and talk more about jian, and because this character is very interesting, there's a lot more to it. So what if we were to consider calm, tan? And honestly, tan, it's more than just calm. Like, I would say, let me just see what Pleco is saying about tan. This is a very interesting character. I love it. Like tan ren, and tan bai is another great word that uses it. And what happens with some of these more advanced characters is I kind of like forget how the English is for them because I just only really used them in Chinese. So let's see, what were we talking about? Yeah, so like it orbits the idea of like level, smooth, calm, composed, but also open and candid. So, you know, that's why tan bai is like the way that you would say I'm letting you know that I love you. I'm tan bai. Like, it's like for the first time ever, I'm revealing that I love you, you know, that type of thing. Or tan bai的说我爱你, right? Like that type of thing. But it can also mean kind of calm. And so when you have tan ran, you get calmly, right? And so, you know, these different types of words, calm, unperturbed, no misgivings, you know, and so I think that is another example of where you see the basic character tan, and then you can add jian after it, and you understand that that means that type of experience. Okay, so then next we have must, which is be. This character refers to any kind of like absolute thing you must do, like, you know, 必须, and 必须. These are words that mean like one of them is like absolutely must do, and then there's must as in your basic survival needs and that type of thing. So that's what this character orbits, certainties. You know, 必然, the appearance of, you know, certainty or obligation. Well, that means inevitably, right? And so if something must be done, then it's, and if something is certain, you know, in this case, I actually think maybe certain, because B is definitely, you know, characters kind of orbit ideas. That's another thing that's very important to understand about Chinese characters, is there's a few concepts that orbit each other with a character, and it doesn't, like, so sometimes people are like, there's so many definitions, but what I find is that if you think about certain and must, they're kind of orbiting a similar thing, which is like obligation in some sense. You know, if something must happen, there's a certainty to it. You know what I mean? And so inevitably, 必然, that's a way you could use that. How about this one? Reluctant. Well, a character that means reluctant, 免. So we have mian ran, mian ran. The mian is like, this is a cool character. You have bi mian, which is a different beat, but that's bi mian would mean to avoid. And so mian ran, this actually means reluctantly, right? It kind of makes sense, right? It's not what you just want to recognize is that if you know the characters, then whatever ran is in this case will be basically saying the appearance of that character. Huo, sudden. And huo ran, in the case of huo ran, it's a little bit more intense than tu ran. It's like, oh gosh, how can I explain this? Huo ran is like, anything that's huoran is so sudden that you're like really shocked by it. Like let me think of like a good example here. For example, it's often metaphorical. Here's a good one. The phrase 豁然开朗 means like sudden enlightenment, like all of the sudden you got it, like you had a epiphany, right? And so it's kind of got more of that feeling. And so even though it's sudden in the sense of like turan is also suddenly, but that's just the generic word for suddenly in Chinese. Huoran is like a sudden flash of inspiration, a sudden flash of understanding. And so it's a very cool word there. And it's cool because the character huo is cool. And so ran just makes it cooler, if that makes sense. So then, okay, how about the character for quiet, qiao. So if you have qiao ran, it's quietly. But here's the thing. It's quietly in a, like I remember at my friend's wedding, I wrote a speech, and the beginning part I wrote in both English and Chinese. And I remember I was just being kind of silly. I was like, 350 million years ago began a process that led to natural selection choosing the survival of the fittest, and out of the process came the greatest possible life form that could have ever existed. And I'm building it up like I'm going to make it say that it's my friend, and I just said that it was his dog. But the point is like, one of the things I said was about like 350 million years ago when life emerged. I just said 悄然诞生, which would mean quietly emerged, like life quietly emerged. So it doesn't mean like necessarily quietly, like I'm walking around my house quietly. You'd probably just say 安安静静的, right? That would just mean like 安静 is the word for quiet. And so like if I said 我安安静静的走过来, right? Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm very quietly walking, right? But in this case, it's more like a quietly in a kind of more metaphorical sense. And then you have something like bold, right? So 悍然. And so again, bold, if a bold, like I love these characters, like they're so interesting, because they end up creating this feeling, because any one of these characters, like at this point I'm focusing on ran, but I could pull out any one of these characters and put them in the main character position, and you'd be able to see, oh yeah, look how this character connects to everything, and you end up building up a feeling for it. So hanran is boldly in some sense, and so you'll usually use this in more of a kind of, a context that befits, the situation. I mean, sometimes it's like hanran is kind of a 贬义词 too, like. So what that means, I should mention. 褒义词 is a positive connotation word. A 中性词 is a neutral word. Most words are neutral. And then occasionally you have a 贬义词, which is a negative word. So a good example of this is 聪明. That means clever, and it's a 褒义词because it's like a positive thing. But then you have 狡猾, which means more like cunning. And so that's actually more of a negative word. They essentially are referring to the same thing, which is like smarts. But 狡猾 is more of like hey, you're trying to get one over on people, right? You're trying to, mess them up. So that what, hanran is kind of like yes, it's boldly, but it's kind of, brazenly. Like it's too much, right? Yeah. Yeah. There's just I'm not going to go too deep into it other than just to say that it's kind of like brazen, outrageous, bold, sure, but it's kind of inappropriate if somebody's using hanren. And then we have one of my favorite characters in Chinese, yo, which refers to leisure or leisurely. So you ren. Whenever I say you ren, I want to put on that like deep Chinese voice from the advertisements, ta zai 公共场所很悠然地走过去. Just kind of like that feeling. Anyway, so that's a good example of the different ways you can use ran as a suffix describing appearance in some way. Okay, so there are other ways to use ran. In fact, probably the most common word that uses ran is ran hou, which just means and then. And then, ran hou ne. It's funny that famous scene from Dude, Where's My Car, where they're at the Chinese restaurant and she kees saying, and then, and they're like, no, and then. That comes from ran hou, right? Which is essentially like, okay, 我先喝一点咖啡，然后回家. Right, so it's like series of events. I'm gonna have some coffee and then I'll go home, right? And so I didn't bring that up here though, because most of the time with words like that, it's not. There are some words like 然后 that I don't think need too much deep analysis because they're so common that you don't need to think much about them. And mostly today, I just want to show you how cool these Chinese characters are. Now, again, why am I doing this? Why am I bothering to focus so much on individual characters? And again, it's because reading makes otherwise incomprehensible listening-based content like TV and podcasts way easier because of the use of subtitles and transcriptions. And if you have the text, you can put that into flashcards in some way, right? So the fact that you can learn to read makes listening and watching stuff easier, way easier. And also there's the problem of Mandarin Chinese having so few syllables. So if you only learn the spoken language, not only are you missing out on the very interesting part of the language called the characters, but you're only able to understand like the basics before you reach a ceiling of what listening can help you understand. It's not literally impossible to get to fluency, like a high level of fluency without characters, but it's really hard. You'd have to be quite committed, and you'd have to have a great tolerance for ambiguity, because you'd keep thinking people were saying things that weren't what they said. Because they might have the same sound or a similar sound, and then you just can't quite get it. But if you learn the characters are completely visually distinct. So even if they have the exact same pronunciation, if you read the character, you're like, well, they might have the same pronunciation, but the characters look nothing alike, so I can tell what they mean. So naturally, though, we understand that if you know the characters, it's very easy to get good at Chinese. But the problem is, of course, that there are so many of them. There's about 3,000 characters. So to become literate, you need to learn thousands of characters and words, and that can be super boring and take years if you don't have the right methods, and especially if you use conventional methods. And there is an alternative, and I'll talk about that during the next break. But let's go ahead and check the chat and see what y'all are saying. Okay. So, I was leaving off with Zine. I have a CSC exam after a couple of days. If you know it, could you give me advice and thank you? I'm afraid I don't know the CSC exam, Zine. If I did, I would be happy to help. How long does it take to learn 3,000 characters? I have already learned 1,000 in 2 months. Well, I try not to think of it in months or years, but in hours, because if you... And then there's another question, because it's also, are you only learning characters, or are you also doing other elements of the blueprint? If you were only learning characters, let's see. Well, there's a learning curve with understanding how to learn characters. right? So that takes about 30 to 50 characters. The way we teach characters is with the Henza movie method. It's an awesome mnemonic system that is very effective. People love it. Got tons of testimonials saying that it really, really works. But it does take about 30 to 50 characters to get that down. So, maybe tack on an extra, 5 to 10 hours. Let's say 10, let's be conservative. 10 hours to understand how the method works, okay? Then you've got a remaining 2,950 characters where you have a method that allows you to learn in 30 seconds to a minute. But let's just be conservative and say that it's 2 minutes. Okay, so let's just do the math there. That's 2,950 characters times 2. So that's 5,900 minutes divided by 60. So that's 98.3 hours, right? And then we'll add on the 10 for learning how the method works, okay? And that's 108 hours. But you have to review. You have to do your reviews, and that is certainly a significant amount of time. It doesn't take that long to do a review, but, I would say, again, you can do this much faster than this, but I'll be conservative and say that each review takes 1 minute. Okay, so we're talking about 2,950, and let me just make sure I take note of that 108 number. So we were at 108, and then we have 2,950, that's the amount of characters, times 5 reviews times 5 minutes each. I mean, again, it doesn't usually take that long to do a review, but because usually you just get the flashcard and it prompts you with the keyword and the pinyin, and if you know it, you just write the character and it takes 10 seconds, but I'm trying to give you a very conservative estimate here so that you're not disappointed if it takes you long. I don't want to give you the best case scenario and then you're disappointed when you don't reach that. So let's say it's 5 minutes each for each character for reviewing. So that's 14,750 minutes divided by 60. So that's 245 hours. Okay, plus 108. So that's plus 108 equals 353 hours approximately. And honestly, I think you could do it a lot faster than that. But if we say 353 hours, then then you just say, okay, how many hours a day am I spending on it? If it's an hour a day, it's under a year. If it's 3 hours a day, it's a few months, right? So it's up to you how quickly you want to go through it. And there are some characters you will learn and be able to review so quickly that it won't even come close to taking that amount of time. But again, I want to go with the worst case scenario so you can have a good sense of it. All right. I have to learn free of cost. Basically you either spend time or money, right? So if you don't have any money, you got to spend time. And so the time you would want to spend is to make sure that you get a character order built. So you want to look at frequency lists of characters. I'm just going to tell you what I did to build the blueprint, and then you can, recognize that this would work. It's just there's a ton of legwork you'll have to do. But, hey, you got time and not money, so, trade in your time. So what you want to do is you get a frequency list. They're out there on the internet. So you research what is a frequency list of Chinese characters, and try to get a frequency list that is not just from CCP propaganda and periodicals. Make sure that it comes from also TV shows and comic books and lots of spoken language materials as well, so that you're not getting a frequency list that is skewed towards the written and formal. That's what we did. And then that'll give you a frequency list. Then you want to take it in about groups of 100, more like groups of 300, and then organize them so take the top 300 most common characters and organize them by common components. Okay, so you want to look at the components inside them and say, okay, this component on the left is the water component. Let me get all of the ones that have the water component. And then you break that down. And then what you have to decide is, okay, what are the easiest ones to learn once I learn each component, and how can I build off it from there? Now, this is admittedly a very brain-intensive process. It's complicated in the sense that you have to be thinking about the common character components and did I learn this yet or did I not? If I did learn it, what are the other ones? Like every single component needs to be analyzed and cross-referenced with the characters. And so, that you do that, and then you also, the tricky thing is that there was an element of what we did with the Mandarin blueprint method that you won't be able to do, which is that like we also knew Chinese when we built it. So like we knew that certain things could be introduced earlier because we just had an intuition for it. But honestly, that sometimes intuition does you wrong. So it's like, it could be good that you're being objective, and then analyze the characters that you've organized by common component, and then put them in order, and then see what high frequency words you can extract from that after each time you unlock a character. And don't unlock every word you can make, just the top 1,000. So get a 1,000 character word list and build it from there. Then at some point, you'll have enough words that you could go to somebody who knows Chinese, a tutor or something. And I mean, at some point, I guess if you wanted to not spend literally any money, you could just try to find comprehensible input YouTube channels, and try to find something that's for a very beginner, and just learn a bunch of words and characters by the method I told you. Oh, and I mean, I also didn't mention that like you're going to need to learn how the Henza movie method works. So the Henza movie method, we have a bunch of articles on our website. Just go to mandarinblueprint.com and search the Henza movie method on our blog, and we have an 8-part series about how it works. So apply that method to memorizing the characters that you put in order, and then apply the method of living links to learning the words. And then eventually, when you know enough characters and enough words, you can go to some of these comprehensible input YouTube channels and you'll understand what to do. Now, I get that that's a lot. And that's why we built Mandarin Blueprint, because we were like, well, we want to save people this time. We did all that, by the way. Everybody who's wondering about how complicated that all sounds, you wouldn't have to do any of that. It's already done for you with Mandarin Blueprint. So essentially, all the characters are organized by how frequent they are, and they're taught with other characters that have common components. And then those characters unlock words that lead to sentences that are very easy to understand because you know all the characters, and the sentences are tailored to exactly where you are, and you just keep building on that as you go through the course. And then eventually we expand that into paragraphs, into dialogues, into opinion pieces, short stories, longer stories with fairy tales from both Western and Chinese perspectives. Then we have a bunch of articles that are in the intermediate course, and then eventually we tell you to really hit the immersion when you get into the upper intermediate course and advanced courses, and all of that. And then of course we have the phrase vault integration coming soon, and so all that's done for you, so it allows you to just go right to the good stuff. But that in that case, you're trading money for time. So you're basically saying, okay, I'll buy the course, but that'll save me all this time. Okay. The answer to how I learned so fast is basically I followed that methodology I just explained. When we visited Hainan, I thought they sounded like pirates when they were laughing and drinking, I suppose. After learning for a few months with the help from your channel, I'm finally traveling to China next month. So excited, and thankfully for your videos. Awesome, Eddie. Can't wait to hear what you think. Keep coming into the live stream and letting us know. Thanks for the great lessons. Greeting from the Netherlands. Glad to have you here. From the postmodern neo-Marxist. I started MB a month and a half ago, and I'm already nearing phase 4. Awesome. I've noticed myself speeding up and getting through reviews faster and faster and learning more each day. The course is great. Well, I'm so glad to hear that. If I can interpret it as a good idea. Can I interpret anything? It's taking the Mandarin Blueprint enough to get through the exams at a language center. Sure. If not, what can we do to add to Mandarin Blueprint course and make us be able to pass the exams? I mean, obviously, it depends on what exam you're talking about, but I know that we cover all of the vocabulary and all of the HSK tests. So now the HSK 9 is apparently harder than the former HSK 6, which was the highest level. Now the HSK 9 is the highest level. I've not taken it, so I can't comment on it too much, but I know that we cover all the vocab in it. So there's that. Green Hand says Epiphany. Nice. Does Horan have positive connotations only? I guess so. Horan does feel like a baoyizi. It's definitely not negative. So it's either neutral or baoyi. This is well done. Yes, yeah, really such good lessons and instructions. Appreciate the work y'all do. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Leo. And with that in mind, let's get back to some stuff that is actually learning, all right? So how about let's talk about Yang, all right? Yang, I love this character. It has the tree component on the left or the wood component. And this means appearance. Why though? What's that about? Well, it has to do with the original meaning of this character relating to like those intricate wooden patterns that they would build in China that were like very beautiful works of art, and oftentimes they'd end up being like, I don't know, like a stairway banister or something with like a lion head. But that beautiful art would end up being what they used to mean the idea of appearance. And now these days, even though it still has the wood component on the left, it's not related to trees or wood in particular, but it has that sort of ancient meaning that is still attached, right? So if you attach it to the character 1, E, and then you say yang, one appearance. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means the same or alike. And I like that, that it turned out that way, right? Because it made me think about such a simple concept as the same. Chinese is like, yeah, it's one appearance. That's the same thing, right? And so usually the way you use it in a sentence is you just take something, 和 something else, 一样. So, how about this? My earplugs. 这个耳塞和这个一样. Right? So that would just mean these two things are the same. And it's because they are. And so they're one appearance. How about if you were to combine it with 字 to make 样子? So 字, really interesting character overall. It often means child or son, but in this context, when it's fifth tone and it comes after a some type of character like this, it's a noun maker, right? So is toe. So for example, 骨头 means bones, and the toe, and it just makes it a noun, right? And so 样子 is a noun meaning appearance. And so, for example, you could use it in all sorts of contexts. Like everything has a 样子. 我的打印机有一个平方的样子. Right? So my printer has a square appearance. You could make anything. 什么样子? That would be a way of saying, that would just be a way of saying like, what appearance is it? 这个大楼是什么样子的? Right? Like what's the appearance of the big building? Is it like a modern architecture? Is it a postmodern neo-Marxist? I guess a building can't be, or can it be? So, that's how you would use 样子. You're going to use that all the time. How about this? 同, that means identical. So, 同样 would just mean the same or similar. Now, you might say, is 同样 and 一样, are they the same? Are they the same way, kind of idea? Obviously, they orbit a similar idea, but you tend to use them a little bit differently. 同样. I mean, I use it sometimes. And by the way, like, I just want to point out that analyzing the minor differences between similar words is not a very fruitful activity. And the reason why is because the way language acquisition actually works is not that you think about what is the right word to use here. It's that when you get to go to speaking, it appears if you've seen it in context before, because your brain is really good at pattern recognition. I think the thing that people don't trust enough is that the brain is like the unconscious mind is smarter than your conscious mind, right? It's like it can recognize a pattern and send you an emotion. Your language is a very emotional thing in a certain sense because you're just feeling it out. And then that makes you think, well, wait, are thoughts and emotions really all that different in a certain sense? Because when you go to speak, if you've gotten enough comprehensible input, you just know what to say, you feel it, right? So 同样 feels right here. 一样 feels right there, and 一样 doesn't feel right here, and 同样 doesn't feel right there. And you don't exactly know why. Why something doesn't feel right is never something you should worry about. Why something does feel right is what you do want to pursue, because there's infinite ways that things can not be right, but there's only so many ways that things can become that are expressed correctly. So 同样, same, similar. This one's interesting. And by the way, in Sichuan, everybody would pronounce this as 模样. Mo, not mu, but 模样 is how it's written in all the dictionaries. So maybe it's just a Sichuan thing that they call it 模样. But here what we have is a mold or a matrix, right? So when you have 模样, this also means appearance, but it's different from 样子 in the sense that, in my experience, 模样 tends to be associated a little bit more with people. You'll usually have it a bit more with like the kind of expression someone had, or the way, like, 他有这样担忧的模样, 模样, 他还好吗? Right? Like, it's like, so she has a very anxious look. Is she okay? Right? It's like you would kind of use it in a sense of the appearance or look of how somebody is. I mean, I'm not saying that's literally always the case. You can use 模样in things that don't relate to people, but I've just noticed that it tends to be more often a description of how people are looking in some way. How about ban? Well, this is a board or a plank, right? So a 样板, an appearance board, an appearance plank of some kind. This is interesting. What would that be? Well, that's actually a model or a template, right? Makes sense. It's like 样, it represents the idea of an appearance. So if you have a 样板, okay, let's have a model or a template for something, And of course, a lot of these things ends up getting applied to computing. So it's just like in English. Like we say, oh, do you have a template for that? It's like originally a template was probably a physical object, but now these days it's usually like a template for a keynote or something, right? And so 样板 is how you would say model or template. 品, this is a product. So if you have a 样品, like the appearance product, it's the thing that we put in our on our windows to show things. Well, it's like the sample or specimen, right? So a sample product, a sample specimen, or some kind of maybe it's a taste test type of thing, but 样品 is what you would use for sample. 这, okay, so this means this. So 这样, or really more often 这样. People used to usually say J these days. I mean, at least they did where I lived, But 这样 or 这样, very common word. It just means like this or as such. 这样说就不好. Don't speak like that. It's not good. Or like, 别这样说 would be don't speak like that. And 这样说不好 it would be like that. That's a no good way to speak, right? It's like that. 你们有这样的手机吗? Right? Like, there's so many ways that you can use 这样. So like, it's like, that's another one of those words I almost didn't include because it's so common, but it's important to know that it's an option there. 这样. And it's, as a learner, there are certain words that you really need to learn because they help you express when you don't know something, So, for example, I might say, I could probably guess what how to say a dry eraser. I could probably guess how to say that, but I have a little dry eraser here. And I don't think I've ever actually learned that because I've never used it in China. And so like, what I would say is, you could just walk into a store and like you pick it up and be like, 你们有更多的这样的那个东西吗? Or, pull up a picture, 这样的东西, 你们在这里卖这样的东西吗? And so like being able to say 这样 is very useful in day-to-day life when you don't know exactly how to explain something. And if you can explain your way there, you've successfully communicated. And if you can successfully communicate, then you've succeeded at language, right? Language is just about communication. Being really fluent is about efficient communication. So a word is a more efficient delivery system than an explanation, right? So I could say, that thing in the kitchen that keeps my food cold. And you know what item I'm talking about. Or I could say refrigerator. And both of them get across the same idea, but refrigerator gets it across more efficiently. But my point is that for those of you who are learning language for the first time, or like maybe it's your first, second language, there's a standard of perfection that you should try to avoid, because it doesn't matter if you have to take a roundabout way of saying something, as long as ultimately you can get your point across. So hopefully you can use words like 这样 to help you with that. Okay, now, one of the reasons that we are so focused on the challenge, we're so focused on reading, is because we've made a new system that allows for people to... I want Rick to be in the shot. Rick, you're the Sultan. So learning to read used to be really hard, and we solved it with the blueprint. So the blueprint is a 9,000 lesson curriculum that can get you to near native level Chinese comprehension in a fraction of the time, because the best alternatives, even the best alternatives we've seen, are not integrated. They're not like an integrated system unless they're university curriculums, and university curriculums use textbooks, classrooms, and teachers who, frankly, it's like they hate their job. It's very frustrating sometimes. And it's like too much of a bureaucratic situation to like, for the people who aren't up to standard getting fired, and like only the best rising to the top. So you end up with this just morbid, like just day by day monotony in university. And sure, it's an integrated structure, so to speak, but it's not even really, because they don't teach characters well at all. So what the blueprint is, and what the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge allows you to try out, is the beginnings of this 9,000 lesson curriculum to allow you to get to comprehensible reading of Chinese as quickly as possible. So if you can get to learning Chinese and reading Chinese within a couple of weeks, we have a 15-day challenge and a 30-day challenge. If you can get to that point, then that essentially puts Chinese at the same starting point as Spanish. With Spanish, if you're going to learn it, you can start reading on day one. With Chinese, you can't start reading on day one, because you have to learn at least enough characters to be able to form a sentence. And before, that was really complicated, because how many characters do you have to learn before you find content that fits your level? Well, it's kind of it's a bit of a crapshoot. You have to just like try to learn a bunch of stuff and then go look for stuff. We now finally have created a system where you can acquire a character within 30 seconds to a minute, where you can then apply that to words that you can learn with a technique we call living links, which is also a very good mnemonic technique. So you learn the words very quickly. So you have rapid acquisition of characters and words. And then because of that rapid acquisition, you can then quickly get to words and characters that form sentences, and they're all characters and words you already know. And so that means that by level 13 of the blueprint, you start reading real sentences without pinyin. And that's like reading a sentence on day one of learning Spanish. Now, you have to keep learning characters and keep unlocking words and keep unlocking sentences. So Chinese still does have way more steps than Spanish does. But the thing is, what I'm showing you today with these word examples is a demonstration of the fact that the easy part of Chinese is the words. Once you learn the characters, the words are super easy. And the grammar is also easy because there's no word form changes in Chinese. There's no good, better, best, and there's no declensions, and there's no gender, right? So it's just puzzle pieces moving around. You can change the order of characters to change the meaning of a sentence, and you can add characters or remove them to change the meaning of a sentence. And so that's all there is to Chinese grammar. Some people say Chinese doesn't have grammar. Those two things are defined as what grammar is. So it has grammar, but it doesn't have all that type of grammar that many other languages have that drive you crazy. So sure, you know, you can start reading Serbian on day one in a certain sense, but why the changes happen, how the declensions work, why, you know, when you're talking about one person's name, you can have like 7 names because they have different endings, and like Mina, Mino, Min, you know, my wife's name is Mina, but like it's not the only way that her name gets expressed in Serbian. And so, you don't have any of that in Chinese. So the problem with Chinese, the thing that makes it so hard for people, is learning the characters and then integrating them into comprehensible input. And we've totally solved it with the blueprint. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, is like, we wanted to make you get all of the stuff that you would have gotten in a university, but in an efficient, you know, don't make any wrong turns, don't fall down the pit path. And so that's what we've done. It's like a Chinese degree on steroids. And normally people get, we sell the blueprint at the moment for $9.97 for lifetime access publicly. And so, look, even with the installment plans, that's too much for many people. So we made the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge as a way for people to try it out. And also, you know, just by the by, if you take the challenge, we'll offer you a discount on the blueprint. So there's a little bit of that as well. And yeah, if you consider what we've done here, Mandarin has gone from being the quote-unquote hardest language in the world to a very fun and enjoyable language to acquire. I don't think it's now the easiest language to acquire in the world, because you still have to get your head around this logographic language, and there's more steps, but no step is hard. So it's simple and rewarding is the way I would put it. It's not easy and fun like one of our competitors says that we make Chinese easy and fun. And actually we talked about it and we were like, no, we're not going to say easy and fun. We're going to say simple and rewarding, because nothing that takes potentially 9,000 steps is simple. It's like saying running a marathon is simple because you just put one foot in front of the other. How hard is that? It's like, or it's easy. Sorry to say that. It's like saying a marathon is easy because all you have to do is take steps. But if every step is clear, if every step is simple, then the reward will be great. So simple and rewarding makes a lot of sense. And that's what the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge is. If you guys would like to check it out, mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls. It's also linked below in the description. And also as a reminder, guys, coming up soon is going to be the premiere of a video that Luke worked very hard on with our video editors and writers called the 99 phrases that he would learn if he started learning Chinese from scratch. And it comes with a free PDF and free audio files that will allow you to listen and repeat. They're like listen and repeat audio files, so you can get all 99 phrases down. And it's great for beginners. It's a great way to just kind of kickstart things right at the beginning. We also have a course called the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter, which is also linked below in the description, which is also great for if you're just starting off. All right, so let's go check in on the chat, see how you guys are doing. All right. Let's see. Cool. Really such good lessons and instructions. Thank you so much for these videos and your clear explanations. I studied Mandarin at school from 14 to 17 and never got higher than HSK 4, the old speculation. You're right. These videos helped me to push forward. Great. Keep up your good work. 以前我想说了，我 Phase 4末马上来到，也试试着做多句. Okay, I can see what you mean. I think, let me see if I can think of a way to say that a little bit better. Yeah, what you can say, yeah, phase 4. First of all, you could say 第四段. 第四段 would be like a way of saying phase 4. And you could say 第四段末. Yeah, I mean that's okay. You could say 第四段结尾, which would mean like the conclusion or the final part. 马上就到了，马上就要到了. That would probably be better. 马上来到 is okay. Yeah. I really got scared when learning Chinese because I got scared because I learned a character a week ago and still can't remember it a week after. Same problem with me. I learn new characters and even like 2 days after I forget. I know, right? Like the thing has too many strokes and too many lookalike. Yep, exactly. Use SRS, I agree, but use the Henze movie method. If you go back to some of my previous live streams, you'll see that I did a demonstration of the Henze movie method a couple of times, and I'm going to keep doing those every so often. And that method for remembering a character is so effective because it utilizes people from your life, objects that are meaningful to you, places that you've been, and actions that you find express the meaning of the character in a systemized mnemonic that allows you to remember the definition, strokes, and stroke order, the pinyin pronunciation, and the tone, all in one little mnemonic scene. Might sound crazy, but it really does work. And taking the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge will also address that because we teach you hence the movie method in the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. Okay, so let's continue with the presentation today because we have yet to talk about May. Beautiful, beautiful May. So Li also means beautiful. So what a shocker, Mei Li means beautiful. Now, this is one of the ways you can say beautiful. A lot of people will say 漂亮, and that usually refers to lots of things can be 漂亮, but 美丽 also means beautiful, and I think that 美丽 has a little bit more of a formal sense to it, but then again, when you're talking about beauty, you often are in that state of mind, right? So saying 美丽 is a perfectly fine way to say beautiful. And I would just point out that this is what we call a juxtaposed word, where both characters mean the same thing, and so it's not like the two characters combine to create some new meaning. They both mean the same thing, and so I always just think of it as like, oh, it's doubly beautiful then because they both mean beautiful. May. And I also think that May is just a naturally quite beautiful character. Okay, 好. So beautiful and good, 美好. Well, that just means fine and happy. 我在中国过了一个美好的时光. I had a happy time in China. Right, my time in China was very happy. And so, 美好,美好, it's a good adjective to describe a lot of things. I use it all the time. Country? Well, what if you were to combine beautiful and country? Well, of course, you would get the back-to-back World War champs, United States. It is kind of funny to me that they ended up going with beautiful country for America, considering all the political strife that there is between China and America at the moment, because you always have this, like, 中美关系 is 中 for 中国, or China, the Middle Kingdom, and then 美 for 美国, the beautiful country, United States. And so 中美关系 means the relations between China and America, and you read that and you're just like, this sounds wonderful. It's like the center of beauty in relationships is like what that literally would mean. And yet usually these days it's like, 中美关系变得太坏了. All right. 容. So this is appearance in some way. And 容 as appearance tends to be like the facade of something. And in the case of 美容, you're talking about like beauty treatment. So you'll see this like treatment usually to your face. And oftentimes this can kind of imply plastic surgery as well. There's a lot of plastic surgery clinics in China. it's really, really popular in Korea, but like in China, it's, as they've gotten richer, plastic surgery has gone up. I actually did a gig playing drums at an event for like a plastic surgery clinic. Like they were having a customer appreciation event, and it was interesting. It's interesting to see all the ladies there that had gotten the surgery, and I suppose if it made them feel better about themselves, it's a good thing. So yeah, 美容 是 美食 beautiful food. Well, this is just delicious food. Mei sometimes just has this sense of like top shelf, because beauty is the top shelf of life, isn't it? So it's kind of like 美食. It's just some kind of delicious food. Now, because of marketing and stuff, a lot of people will call their stuff 美食, even if it doesn't really qualify. But hey, that's what it means. 美妆,美妆. So 妆 is any kind of makeup. And so 美妆 is just the word for cosmetics. And so, if you see a cosmetic store, it might just be called, as a generic term, a 美妆店, because any kind of 店 is a store in that sense. How about 德, 美德? So 德 is virtue, beauty and virtue. So this is actually just the word for virtue. And I like this because, virtue is one of those things that, like, it's not completely subjective, but it's also, to some degree in the eye of the beholder. Like there's some aesthetic to it a little bit. And as a result, saying 美德 makes a lot of sense to me, because, you're saying that we're in the aesthetic realm of morality, kind of. Yeah. Also, 美德 would mean the relationship between America and Germany, because Germany is 德国. So if you see 美德, you could see 美德关系, would mean America's relationship with Germany. So if you take the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about it, because if I'm suggesting that you should learn all these words, and in order to learn the words, you should learn characters, I should just tell you a little bit about how we propose you do it over the next, 15 or 30 days. But basically, if you take the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, day one, just a pre-challenge day, getting you set up, we get you up to speed on how to pronounce Mandarin if you've never done anything with Mandarin pronunciation before. And if you do, then then you don't have to do that part, and then you can get right to setting up your flashcards. And so you can jump into day two if you get that part done quickly, but after that, on day two, we get started with phase 1, which is levels 1 through 6, characters 1 through 46, and you begin learning how to do the Henzamui method, the proven method for learning a character, meaning, writing, pronunciation in just about 30 seconds to a minute. And this part is a steep learning curve, but we're challenging you to get that out of the way, because once you learn the method, you can then use it for 2,950 characters. So it's very useful. And then the second half, we do vocabulary building, where you're not just doing the Henzamui method, but you're also learning compound words like 美德, or these various 2-character words. Those are all compound words where you combine the meanings of the 2 characters to make words. And it's pretty easy, because Chinese is a very logical language. We do that through living links, and you finish your flashcard reviews every day. And then the final day is the acquisition day, because in the final day, you'll unlock hundreds of sentences. It's not just that you unlock the sentences in level 13. You get access to phase 3, which is levels 13 through 20. So you have access to the materials you need to learn 245 characters and a ton of sentences. Probably enough sentences. I want to say phase 3 probably has somewhere between 600 and 1,000 sentences, right? So it's a great way to kickstart your literacy, just having that. Now, the last day of the challenge is when we want you to be reading sentences in level 13, but you get to keep it for another 15 days after. So you could keep going for the next 15 days and make a lot of progress. So if you take it all the way to the end of phase 3, you'd know 263 characters, 350 words, and many hundreds of example sentences. And that would cover about 65% of the language by coverage. And, so if you take, the way it works is if you take regardless of which one you choose, you get 15 days extra afterwards, just to make sure that you have a chance to go through everything. And it also takes a little pressure off because you can go through it fast, and that's good if you can go through it fast. But you might have something come up in life and you miss your goals for a day. Well, you have 15-day buffer. So it's like you can draw a line and just start again the next day. So so that's the actual way that it works if you do the MB challenge. And I mentioned before, there's a 15-day version and a 30-day version. And the only difference is the 15-day version is a lot more work per day. I'd say probably 2 to 3 hours per day. But anyway, I'll get into that in a little bit. But let me continue on with may, because there's a bunch more words you could use with it. May wait, for example. Well, a beautiful taste. Well, what could that be? Well, it's just delicious. It's one of the ways to say delicious. And usually people will learn 好吃, which means good to eat, as a way of saying delicious. And that's one of the ways. But usually if you were describing the food in your restaurant, you would say 这些美味的菜, right? You wouldn't, you could still say 好吃, but 好吃 is very colloquial. 美味 is a little bit more elegant. Guan. So guan is a perspective of any kind, right? Your view and perspective. Guan. So a mei guan. What do you guys think that would be? Any guesses? Well, something that's very pleasing to look at, right? So it's if you are standing at the top of the mountain looking out at the landscape, that's a mei guan, and you would describe it as being pleasing to the eye. Mei guan. Man. Mei man. So man means full, and mei man. This is a great word, and because it basically means happy or blissful, but it often gets added, you put de after it, and you can, it's basically like saying, you know what, I realized I was thinking of a different word, yuan man. But still though, mei man, it's full of beauty, right? So anything that's full of beauty is blissful, right? And I think that many of us have experienced this type of, you're filled up when you're surrounded by beauty. Jiu is wine, alcohol of any kind. So a mei jiu is usually a fine wine. So if you're talking about something that's been aged for 45 years in a cask in California or something like that, we call that a mei jiu. Hu. Now this one isn't actually a word. I just wanted to show you that with Chinese, you can add mei in front of almost any noun, and it just means that thing being beautiful. Beautiful pot. Mei hu. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a word that you would find in the dictionary. Sometimes you can just use mei as a direct descriptor. Sheng, a beautiful voice, mei sheng. Well, in this case, it's usually referring to beautiful singing. Now, technically, sheng is any kind of a voice, but if you say mei sheng, it usually refers to singing, because in a sense, singing is the most beautiful version of a voice. I suppose somebody could have a really beautiful speaking voice, but somebody who's amazing at singing, it's hard to argue that somebody speaking is more beautiful than that. So mei sheng. And then we bringing back yang again. So mei yang, a beautiful appearance. Well, it's just a beautiful appearance. So you can, it basically means 美丽的样子. But instead of saying 美丽的样子, remember before how I was saying that a good word is one that makes your communication delivery mechanism more efficient? Well, 美样 is an example of that. 美丽的样子 would be one way to express something, or you could just say 美样, and that would mean you got the same idea across in fewer sounds. And just one more thing I'll say about the MB challenge before we go into the last bit on May. which is just what exactly will you learn the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. I mentioned this before, 263 common Chinese characters, 350 common words. And that's if you finish everything, including the stuff that comes after the challenge. And you'll get all the flashcards. You get a bunch of flashcards and completely comprehensible Chinese with studio quality audio. You can download the listening practice. And the main thing, though, the main benefit you get from taking the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge is you learn the Henza movie method and the living links technique. Because if you use the living links technique and the Henza movie method, you'll learn how to be able to learn a Chinese character and word so much faster. It's unbelievable how much faster you learn it compared to other methods out there. And so by being able to do that, you've gotten yourself a huge amount of value for the $7. So mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls. All right, I'm going to hop into the chat here briefly and then finish up on May. All right. Okay, we obviously got into a big conversation here, so I'm gonna not necessarily answer everything here, but there's this big discussion about SRS and the Henza movie method. SRS just basically ensures that anything that you learn is repeated at the exact intervals you need, but the minimum intervals you need so that you for sure remember. So that's the way you can think of it, is like, what's the minimum amount of times that I can be reminded of this fact and still remember it? And because you're using this great mnemonic technique, the SRS algorithm, it's flashcards. It's smart flashcards. But dumb flashcards, you would look at the same flashcards every day. With smart flashcards, if you answer them correctly, you see them less often. And if you answer them incorrectly, you see them more often. And the result is that your reviews are exactly what you need to see, essentially. And so that's the most efficient way to review. And so, let's see, going back, helped me learn 2,000 plus characters. Right. So yeah, long discussion about Anki here. Welcome, Danuli. I'm 13. I feel old, bro. Dang. I'm 36. I feel young. All right. Well, you guys have obviously gone into like a whole discussion here. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and then we'll finish up after this next slide. So let's check it out. So May. All the previous words I showed you were all words that had like kind of, they were like may something, right? Let's get into some words where it's a different type of thing. So for example, 审美. I like this one. So 审 is to examine. 审查 would mean to like be investigated in some way. So examine 审. 审美 is an aesthetic. Now, 审美标准 is a word that people use to indicate that our standard of beauty, our aesthetic, our beauty sense is different, usually in different countries. Chinese people comment on this all the time because the Chinese women that I thought were the most beautiful, a lot of times people will be like, really? Like the Chinese people will be like, really? You like her? And then they would show me who they think is beautiful. And I'd be like, oh, really? You like her? And they were like, 我们的审美标准是不一样的. And it's like, yeah, that's true. I mean, like definitely the standards of beauty in different countries are different. Now, I think there's a certain level you pass where like almost anybody in the world is like, well, all right, that's pretty beautiful. But like on the margins, it's like there's definitely a lot of differences between the different countries, right? So that's how you would express that 审美, an aesthetic or a standard of beauty. 华, that means splendid. 中华人民共和国, the People's Republic of China. And 华 tends to be used also, not just to mean splendid, but also it refers to China in general and like Chinese people. For example, 华裔 are the overseas Chinese. 华美 Well, that just means magnificent. So you're combining splendid and beautiful. It's magnificent, 华美. 助 means to assist or help. So like 帮助 is the general word for help in Chinese. So 助美 will just mean to assist in the beauty of something. So whether it be that it is, maybe it could be the foil in the background. I don't mean like literally like aluminum foil. It could be how the sky foils with the tree. 衬托着 is the Chinese word for that. And so or maybe like there's a bunch of ladybugs on a flower and they look nice. You could say 他们在助美. They're assisting in the beauty. Respect. 尊美. So this would just mean to respect beauty, right? So sometimes the Chinese characters combining is just obvious, right? And again, this is why learning individual characters will make Chinese so much easier. I like this one. Graceful. 修 美. So that means elegant. And it's very true. 修 always has that feeling of like elegant and meticulous and just perfect, right? And 蜀绣 is a type of art from Sichuan, and it's like the needlepoint art that you can get, where it's just very meticulous, and the threads go through on both sides, and they create like beautiful sort of, it could be pandas, or it could be, a ancient Chinese woman wearing a qipao, and like they're very beautiful. They take a long time to make, and that's called a 蜀绣, and 绣 ends up having a very like elegant, graceful feel to it. So 秀美, elegant. Now this one, 羞, this means to feel shy. So 羞美 means bashfully beautiful. So like this is that kind of thing, like the classic, like, oh, we took her glasses off and she suddenly became beautiful, like in the classic romantic comedy movie from the 90s or something. And so the kind of sense of like, oh shucks, 秀美. So it's like that bashfully beautiful thing there. It's pretty cool. Cool word. And then yan. This yan, it's like this character means more than just face, but it's one of its meanings. So and it's also not the primary word for face. The primary word for face is lian. But you'll notice that in Chinese, there's a lot of archaic words and formal words for the same thing. So almost everything has its formal counterpart also. So if you say yan mei, you're referring to a beautiful face. You're saying like that is like it's getting across the point when you're describing somebody this way that it's specifically their facial features that make them beautiful. Okay. So that finishes today's presentation on Ran, Yang, and Mei. And, you guys can join the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge if you'd like, mandarinbb.com/challengeLS. It really will help you get your characters down, which helps you get your words down, which helps you get your sentences down. So it's all interconnected and very helpful. And thank you so much, everyone. Let's take a look at the chat here, see if there's anything else that we can discuss. What is the first video I should watch because I'm very new to your channel? Well, it depends on where you're at with your Chinese learning, but if you're brand new to Chinese, I would say that watching our pronunciation primer, it's the most popular video, long form video on our channel. So if you go to videos and then sort by most popular, you'll find it. It's one of the best ways to get started is to make sure your pronunciation is on point. So check that out. But also, as I mentioned earlier, today, Luke is premiering a video that he made. I believe it's in about an hour and 10 minutes. called The 99 Phrases I Would Learn on Day 1 If I Started Learning Chinese Over Again. It's basically, that's the concept of the video. And so if you are just starting off, watch that video. It's coming out very soon. And it will come with an awesome little PDF and audio files. So he's been working very hard to make sure that if he's making a video like that, that you have the materials to also practice. So it's quite nice and helpful. So cool. I would watch that first. Interesting. That's why whenever I cannot remember and characters and there's no internet, I slap my pen and tell my brain, you better remember, or if you don't have the internet, I will slap you. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Well, thanks, guys. And I really appreciate everybody coming around for these live streams. If you want, leave a comment below this video letting me know what other types of streams you would be interested in checking out. You know, I've got several ideas. I do Henza movie method demonstrations showing you how you can learn a character in 30 seconds to a minute. I do these where I show you how logical Chinese words are by learning character by character. I want to do some ones on sort of situational Chinese and help explain like how we teach situational Chinese in the phrase vault. Also, you know, thoughts about sentence structure is one thing I could do. I don't want to do too many of those because I don't want people to get caught up on sentence structure, but there's a few things you can learn that make it quite easy. And so, yeah. Oh, wait, is there anything that can help me write Chinese characters? Right, yeah. Okay, well, yes, the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, which is like pasted all over my background here, is our method for learning Chinese characters. If you want to hear me talk about it, like, you know, you can rewind the live stream because I talk about it on the margins there. But also you can go to mandarinbp.com/challengeLS and it will tell you all about what it is. But essentially, you'll learn how to get a character down very, very quickly. So, yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, what time is it in China? I guess I'm not in China, but if in China, it would probably be 9:51 p.m. right now. So, yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. And